The top narrative that the left has been pushing these days is on race. Probably the most ridiculous conspiracy theory they have is that there's such a thing as white supremacy in the United States. Institutional supremacy, never mind that the left runs all the institutions. Systemic racism, whatever term you want to use. That basically, white people have privilege, they can do whatever they want, they get an advantage in society. Black people can never succeed no matter what they do. They're hopelessly oppressed and kept down. So what's the reality of the situation? We talked yesterday on the show about how there's only one example of legal racism in this country. There's just one. And it doesn't go along with the leftist narrative. It's called affirmative action. And it privileges black and Hispanic applicants to college and to employment, and it disadvantages white and Asian applicants. And that's why right now the DOJ Civil Rights Office is looking into Yale University for doing just that. That's racial discrimination on the books. That's institutional racism. Left doesn't talk about that, though, because that doesn't go along with their narrative. Here's how you know their narrative on race and white supremacy and whatever other word you want to use is bogus. Look at what's happening in Portland right now. So there's a video just came out of a man getting brutally beaten in Portland. Happens to be a white guy, by the way, who's getting beaten up. You got a group around him, BLM, Antifa. Oh, then a guy just kicked him in the head. A lot of N-word being thrown around here, which we have bleeped out as one does. That doesn't look good. That guy doesn't seem to have a whole lot of white privilege. So what happened? You know, you look at that and you say, gosh, what could that guy have done to deserve it? You know what that guy did to deserve it? He was sitting in his car, sitting in his truck, when a group of these BLM and Antifa thugs surrounded him and got themselves into and got him especially into a very dangerous situation. They walk up. You got these what appear to be BLM activists, some Antifa maybe too, showing up, screaming at this guy who's sitting in his truck. A lot of them. They got probably, 8 or 9 over here. They start attacking some woman. At this point, the guy's going to get out of his car to try to help skip ahead. So the guy finally says, this is not a good situation. He slowly drives out of there, make sure he doesn't run anybody over, and then he finally starts to drive faster. Well, eventually, he crashes his car. He's obviously very nervous. And the BLM and Antifa thugs pull him out of his car and just wreck this guy. You probably haven't heard very much about him. CNN doesn't talk about that guy very much. Not a lot of articles in the New York Times about him. Ask yourself this. If that had been a black guy, or any minority, any person of color, I don't know, whatever term the left is using these days, if that had not been a white guy, and it was a political event, and in any way you could tie the rioters, demonstrators, anything, to the right wing, the Proud Boys, or whatever else, if you could tie them to the right in any way, you think you would have heard about that? I think you probably would have. You think that would be national news? I think it probably would be. You think it would be international news? Very possibly it would. So why are these incidents treated differently? Because one of them feeds a left-wing narrative on race that is politically advantageous to Democrats, and one of them does not. One of them either says nothing about that narrative or counters that narrative. So you're not going to hear about it. Meanwhile, you're going to hear a lot more about white supremacy. But if we lived in a white supremacist country, don't you think that media situation would be the opposite? I think there are some people who genuinely believe we're living under white supremacy. Oh, where's the evidence for that? There's no evidence. There's just the conspiracy theory cooked up by the left and propagated by some of the biggest people in media. And they're open about it. You know, we've talked on this show before about how, conservatives tend not to consider our race or our ethnicity to be our primary identity category. So if you ask me, hey, Michael, what are you? I'd say, I don't know, I'm Catholic, I'm American, I'm New York original, I live in LA, I'm a podcaster. I'd have all of these different identity groups. Maybe I'd get down to Sicilian, Italian, a little English in there mixed in, a little Mayflower in there. maybe way, way, way down, I'd say, oh, I'm a white guy too. You know, they always talk about how I'm a white guy, but I guess, yeah, sure, okay, way, way, way down. But for the left, it's not like that. For the left, race is the primary category. So if race is the primary category, what's it look like? Well, and according to the mainstream media, white is a bad thing. It's an epithet. That's why this word Karen, which is a racial epithet, it's considered socially acceptable. It specifically, explicitly refers to white women. And you're allowed to say that, this derogatory term. But if there were any comparable term to refer to black women or Hispanic women or Asian women or whatever, you would be arrested for saying that. It would be so socially unacceptable, you would at least be ostracized. But white women, it's okay. I hope you enjoyed that short segment from the Michael Knowles Show. Be sure to check out the full episode linked in the description or download the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts.